right, so what we're going to do this afternoon to kick things off is to jump into this Lion's Den activity that you all hopefully participated in. Everybody voted, right? Everybody voted? Yeah? Yay. So we're going to begin by reflecting a little bit, because that's one of those things we like to think about here at an event like Learning Design Summer Camp. Reflecting on the first couple of rounds so far before we jump into the final two rounds and give you guys a chance to, make your pitches, maybe help your practice. That's one of the advantages of an activity like this over something like March Madness, for example. So I'm going to jump back over to Chris here. He's going to reflect on some of our...
So you might have seen who won round one based on what was in round two. But we wanted to give you an opportunity to say, well, why did I pick flipped classrooms? Why did I pick makerspaces? We'll ask for one volunteer to say why they might have chosen one over the other. Then we'll reveal how much the winner and how much it won by, and then we'll sort of move on to the next one. So, is anybody who picked flipped classrooms and would like to say why they won with flipped classrooms?
Hands got to go back up. Who? Anyone?
Nobody said flipped classrooms.
I know I saw some hands. Okay, there we go.
I thought it would be easier to implement with existing space constraints. So within organizational structures like building, makerspace, making it harder to get justification for the space, taking away from other resources, and build out a facility to have that kind of resources. And the classroom has kind of a lower barrier to entry.
Anybody that went with makerspaces? No? Well, the results will tell who actually voted. So, clearly some people said makerspaces. Perhaps you're all still at lunch. Or maybe you're making things. I don't know. So here's the results. Pretty interesting. And we'll see how flipped classrooms fares in round two. So, same idea. Adaptive learning technologies versus games and gamification. I know which one Stubbs would probably pick.
Just for the record, I'm very biased, so be careful who raises their hand for adaptive learning technology. But yeah, who voted for adaptive learning tech? Why? There's no joke.
More or less for the same reason, the barriers to entry. I thought there are third-party groups that are already implementing this adaptive learning, whereas games are pretty hard to produce. They require a lot of resources.
Good points. What about games and gamification? Put in a vote for that. Pass that.
No?
I thought everybody's so shy.
I mean, games and gamification, since I've been to all of Stubbs' talks over the last 10 years, 5 years? Yeah. It still has momentum in that it's constantly a way to engage and reward participation, no matter what the changing technology to implement it is. It can be very simple up to very complex.
All right, and actually, I did see the results of all these, but I don't remember. So, whoa, that one was actually pretty close. Sorry, Stubbs. I know you'll be crying in your pillow later, but perhaps next time.
The people have spoken.
Yeah, I suppose.
Oh, we have another comment?
Well, actually, you could argue, one could argue that games and gamification and adaptive learning both deal with lots of data and use that data to make changes, perhaps in the future. So you could argue that it's really, in some ways, the same thing, but after kind of doing the same thing in a way.
I think there's definitely a lot of truth to that point, and it very much depends on how you want to use both of them. Because I think that games could just be another form of adaptive learning technology, to be honest. Which means I still win.
There you go.
But no, really good point.
Hashtag winner. So, quantified self and virtual assistants. These were sort of a little more abstract, not some of the things that we normally talk about. So I could see some people not being exactly sure about what those mean. In fact, I know some people asking questions about them. But these did come from the Verizon reports, so you can blame them for their confusing titles. Anybody want to talk about the quantified self or virtual assistant? Why you voted for one versus the other? Not all at once. All right, duke it out.
We've got two right.
I voted for virtual assistants, thinking, with Siri and Microsoft's implementation and being able to speak to Google, that's going to be within 5 years compared to the quantified self, which I didn't know what that meant.
That's exactly why I voted for a virtual assistant, because I already know that's happening and somebody's always popping up on the internet and saying, hey, can I help you? So that's already happening, but I had no idea what the quantified self meant.
So how many people?
On a scale of,
So just out of curiosity, how many people don't know what quantified self is? A lot of people, okay. So quantified self is, it's the Fitbit, right? It's the idea that there are a lot of tools out there now that are collecting all kinds of data about you, and data that you can use for some purpose, right? To help improve the way you eat, the way you sleep, the amount of exercise you get, the ways that you study, the ways that you interact with your friends, all kinds of things like that. So that's just this idea, is that there's all kinds of new tools that can help you measure on a definite number of things, and that number of things is sort of ever increasing. That's quantified self. Well, I hope, does that make sense? Another comment?
I want to add a little bit extra examples for quantified self, but that's more learning related. Right now, quantified self, most of the products we see are for the health, for the well-being, for exercise. But I read about this study where they were measuring the distance between the screen and your torso. So when they realized that whenever you get more confused, you lean toward the screen, tiny bit of distance. So in that sense, by wearing the sensor, you can actually measure how much you understand the material, even though you may subconsciously not know that. So it actually has a lot of potential, and they also have this, detecting the facial expression, how much your eyebrow move toward each other, so that sort of thing. They can measure whether your students are getting what you're teaching them or not. So that's a big thing coming. Go for it.
That's pretty powerful stuff. That's pretty cool. Nice to get. Another?
So TK, if I go to a bar and a woman leans forward towards me, it's not because she's interested, she's just confused. I voted for quantified self because I still have nightmares about the Microsoft paperclip.
That's right.
I wanted to now that I know what quantified self is, and again, I'm in the College of Agriculture, I have seen quite a few presentations from a faculty research perspective of students using various different technologies. I can see that really being used and integrated, actually, now that I know what it is, more rapidly than the virtual assistants as far as teaching and a learning tool, because that really gets students involved and is a great way of doing that. That's something that I would get really excited about.
So the data here might end up being skewed. Let's find out what everybody said. Well, quantified self did surprisingly well, given that like 90% of the people in the room had no idea what it was. Sound really good. Yeah, virtual assistants won out by a narrow margin. All right, the next one, virtual reality, augmented reality versus open educational resources. An interesting pairing. Who wants to tell them what they voted for here?
I picked open ed resources. I just feel like with the rising cost of education, that's kind of where we're going as a way to offset the high costs. There's kind of the challenge of trying to deliver a degree for cheaper. I know some of the governors eschewed challenges for the $10,000 bachelor's degree. So I think that as we look to cut costs, that's a logical way of doing so. So I kind of thought that was good today.
All good points. Anybody voted for virtual reality or augmented reality? Nobody. Ah, all right, let's see.
Which we 100%.
So, can I comment?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This applies to some of the others. I think when I looked at makerspaces or games and gamification, there was mention of kind of startup costs and resources required, which I think is relevant for the virtual reality and augmented reality. I think more fundamentally, it's harder to figure out what the applications are across the disciplines. Whereas something like open educational resources, you can do that in any discipline. Any faculty member can probably find something that's useful. So for me, I went for OER for the kind of applicability, not necessarily the resource challenge.
I think that is a fantastic point. The more specialized it gets, the harder it is to sort of abstract it out to multiple different disciplines. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Oh, you have another?
In terms of the virtual reality, augmented reality, I think there are a lot of things that I've been hearing of applications of that technology where, say, there are historical locations around the world that might be becoming, extinct, destroyed for whatever reasons, and if there were imaging of those spaces where maybe through the use of an Oculus Rift or something, a student might be able to walk through those spaces without if they don't have the opportunity to travel there, if these things don't exist anymore as a way to study architecture or archaeology and things of that nature through that method, as well as, augmented reality, if you could play with a technology that no longer exists, examine it, and see how it's engineered and things like that, that might be an opportunity to interact with things that don't actually exist and aren't easily able to be interacted with at this point.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, I was having this very interesting conversation with Julia Seal here. He is a visually impaired user, learning for quite a while, and he was sharing that his experience with me. He was saying that most of us rely on one sense in learning, and for most of us, it's the visual. We read. That's our primary ways of learning. And he was talking about some other tactile users. They have very incredible memory about things, about forming different ways of learning. I think virtual reality is actually, if we can look at that as a different, opening up different channels of learning. For example, if we're learning a spatial relationship rather than visually, how about using the audio type of cue to help us understand the sequences of things or the location of things, and how about using other means, touching, feeling, or some other means. So I think supposed to, in addition to thinking about virtual reality in the visual sense, about representing something that's, remote, we can also think about that actually encourages us to learn things from a different way or open up more channels of perception.
So to build on that comment, and Roger said, I have to give a shout out to Ann Clements' project, the Open Innovation Challenge winner this year. And one of the things she's doing is working on developing a virtual reality tool that helps teachers practice their teaching. And I think, so the cost that was brought up in a couple of different cases makes a lot of sense when you're talking about virtual reality or augmented reality. But I think it can also help reduce costs on the back end. So in the case of Ann, right, bringing a student out to a real class to help teach is a very expensive or time-consuming proposition, whereas if you can recreate that kind of experience in a virtual setting, it gets most of the way there. You can help save money or create additional opportunities for students to learn. So yeah, it works both ways. But let's see what the people have said. Open educational resources with 66% of the vote. Not too bad. All right. Well, so I hope this is starting to be helpful, and sort of to hear some of the perspectives of everybody else in the crowd. And maybe you guys talked about your votes beforehand, maybe not. But given that we are very rapidly running out of time, we want to make sure that we have enough time to get through the final rounds to see who the ultimate winner is, and then you can have year-long bragging rights over your bracket and show that you are the ultimate in educational trends, awesome, this, Victor, etc. Other words. That was not a good sentence. It's the post-lunch comment. Chris, are we ready to do the round 3 voting?
You mean round 2? If you could, Megan, all I need you to do is just hit launch and then take that URL and put it into the tiny URL, same schema as the previous 2. It's just that easy. Right. She's doing that while we're doing this. Because unfortunately it's all narrowly timed together to give everybody enough time to vote. So, match 5, 3D. Bring your own device versus 3D printing. Bring your own device? Yes? No? Okay, we'll have to go with shorter answers for why you picked them. Who is around?
I did. I'm just kind of excited. I mean, BYOD is pretty much here already in terms of, I don't see that reversing anytime soon. I mean, I think 3D printing is going to have a huge impact too. So really, I'd probably vote for like both of these, but I'll give BYOD a slight edge.
Okay. So 1 vote for BYOD. Anyone 3D printing?
What about bring your own 3D printer? It's the same.
Really better backpacks, I think, but I think it could work. So no votes for 3D printing. Survey says, well, Brad, you spoke truth here. 73% for bring your own device. All right, Internet of Things versus learning analytics. Do you have any votes either way here? Everybody getting shy. We can just run through these if that okay.
We do have a lot of them, so
Yeah.
that's
Okay, so 67% learning analytics. Wearable technology versus MOOCs. Wearable technology.
No way. No way.
And we've got some boobs. I like this now.
Seriously. Tens of thousands of people learning things versus a freaking Fitbit? Sorry, I'll buy it. Don't lie.
tens of thousands of them.
Yeah. Yeah, but educational uses of wearable tech? Someone convince me, please. Someone convince me. Yeah, your Apple Watch can let you know you have an email. I mean, come on. How is that going to help learning?
So, as a business support to be wearable tech, so.
It's not rockets without trash talking, right?
I like this fun. So Rain Sperling actually is working on a project right now with the Apple Watch to do sort of like what TK was talking about in terms of the quantified self. So the ability to push out very periodic questions to students that are designed to get them thinking more educationally. So have you met with groups recently? Have you studied recently? Have you just things that are meant to be sort of subtle triggers for that to do something similar to what a Fitbit might do for more of a learning context. So yeah, I can understand the sheer volume of people who have gone through MOOCs, but there are some potential educational applications as well.
You need to move on wearable technology.
That would blow everything away.
So digital badges and hybrid classrooms. Any comments on the results? It's pretty narrow.
We don't need no fake badges.
I knew somebody was
If I had voted, I would vote for hybrid classrooms. I think the hybrid classrooms, again, from that aspect of bringing together various different ways of communicating and interaction and having that as a part of the learning environment and as a part of the real world that both the faculty and students and everybody else is going into, I think that sort of brings together the best of everything in my mind. And so I think that's very exciting.
Anybody on badges or anybody else on hybrid classrooms? Okay.
There is a second.
Okay, we're gonna miss out on the grand reveal here, since you guys have
Sorry.
already seen the answer.
Second one. Okay, round two. I forgot to put in the verses, sorry. Flip classrooms versus adaptive technology.
Adaptive
Comments?
tech, one. Anyone surprised?
I am.
Pretty loud. So yeah, I am kind of, I mean, it was kind of close, but so in my 10 or 15 years of doing this, I've never seen anything take off on campus like the flipped classroom. And so I see a lot of potential in both of these, right? I picked both in the first round. But flipped classroom, like faculty get it. Like they kind of have to have an answer to the flipped classroom question. If you're just lecturing your students all the time, why are you still doing that? And so the flipped classroom provides kind of another way. And again, it's a kind of an applicability thing. Now, you know, our college in the English department, is he on? Yeah, okay. Our colleagues in the English department, you know, they don't need to flip their classroom, right? That would involve students silently reading great novels during class and then going online and talking about it later, right? Like that seems absurd. But generally, this is a model that can help a lot of faculty make better use of class time, and it just seems more broadly applicable than adaptive learning technology, which is still a few years out from being kind of mainstream. That's my argument.
All right, so we're gonna rapid fire through the last couple of matchups here so we get a chance to vote. Virtual assistants versus OERs, or Open Educational Resources. Open Educational Resources with a big win. BYOD versus Learning Analytics. BYOD came out on top yet again. Wearable tech versus hybrid classrooms, and hybrid classrooms wins, 53 to 47.
They're getting a lot tighter. So, and then that leads us to the end of rounds 1 and 2. So again, to vote for the final four, NCAA Please Don't Sue, we'll ask that you go to the same URL as before, which is tinyurl.com/LDSC15R3, and I will type that with it. So that'll get us through the remaining four, I should say. And by the end of the day, we'll have 2 left. And so during group sessions, final session, we can pick our final 2 and announce a winner overall. And hopefully folks can announce whether or not they were able to predict the entire bracket. I think that'll be really interesting.
So cast your votes now.